Okay. Module 33, Integrated Pest Management and Sustainable Agriculture. So our learning goals today are to describe the goals and techniques of integrated pest management, explain the objective of sustainable agricultural practices. We only have two. Okay? So, first one, integrated pest management, or IPM, uses a variety of techniques to control pest species while minimizing the pesticide input into the environment, increasing the agricultural output. So they're reducing their pesticide usage while still trying to maintain or increase their agricultural output. Okay. These methods include crop rotation, intercropping, biocontrols, and minimal pesticide controls. So crop rotation, as you probably guessed, is planting a variety. Is a planting strategy with different types of crops. Species are planted from season to season on the same plot of land. Mr. Levin, how does that help reduce the pests? I'm going to tell you. Okay, so one season, bugs that like to eat corn could plant their seeds or their eggs, not seeds, they're bugs. Anyways, their eggs into the soil, thinking that the next season that comes around is going to be corn. Well, if you plant beans there, then those bug babies are probably going to starve, right? Because it's not the food that they eat. Does that make sense? Okay, so the bugs will lay eggs in the soil for the season, expecting it one thing, and then they come up and it's the next thing, and it's a different crop, which means they're going to starve. Good. Intercropping. This prevents pests from getting used to one crop and prevents crop-specific diseases from setting in. So again, if you don't have the food there or the power source, they can't run the rest of the cycle, right? Okay. Intercropping. So intercropping is a strategy that allows for spacing of your crops growing at the same time to promote biological interactions. So in this situation, one crop can attract insect predators for another crop. So an example of this is marigolds. So marigolds, when you're trying to plant your garden, are really good because they attract pollinators. And so pollinators are good for fruiting plants because like tomatoes and things like that need to be pollinated before they produce fruit. And so that'd be helpful. Another example they give is trees. I guess marigolds also keep away white tomato flies. That's kind of neat. Okay, trees will increase the attractiveness to birds, and so that way the birds will come and eat the insects, and they won't be eating your plants. Okay. Questions about that? Okay. Another important method of IPM is biocontrols, which allows biological factors to control agricultural pests. Typically, this involves introducing a species that will consume a pest eating the crop. The studies must be conducted in order to ensure the introduced species will not consume or will consume a controlled amount of pests. Okay, so you wouldn't want to bring in something that's just going to ravage the area. You don't want their population to grow too quickly, right? So, like cats will eat mice. Okay, so if you're trying to grow clover, you're going to have cats to eat the mice. That way, your clover can grow, which is better for your cows. Yeah. Okay, natural predators are predators that could occur naturally in the environment, ideal for IPM. So, some IPM allows for pesticides to be used in small amounts if pests remain after one step of IPM is exhausted. So, natural predators again would be like planting trees in between your crop rows. So that way, birds can live there and eat the insects, or frogs eating the flies, etc. What this allows, all these things allow us to do is to use less pesticides or more direct pesticides instead of a big one that tries to get a bunch of different pesticide or pests. It's more targeted. So that way you can use less of it and you actually have a bigger yield. So you can see on this diagram, you see your diagrams, the number of pesticides application. So before IPM training, okay, they use a lot of pesticides, and then you can see their yield after IPM training typically goes up. And so it goes up because you are using less harmful chemicals on your plants, right? But you're still getting the same output because you're using these more natural methods that would happen naturally. That makes sense. This is a great graphic. Okay. So sustainable agriculture fulfills the needs for food and fiber while enhancing the quality of the soil, minimizing the use of non-renewable resources, and allowing economic viability for farmers. A key step to achieve this is soil conservation, which is preventing soil erosion while increasing soil depth and increasing nutrients and organic matter. So remember that when we talk about tilling, tilling, it takes the top layers of the soil and kind of mixes it together, which loosens it up, and that makes it easier for wind and water to carry it away. So you're reducing your actual amount of soil, so you have less soil overall, and with that comes the nutrients. So you want to keep the soil, right? Methods of sustainable agriculture require more labor and they are higher cost, but allow for land to be more productive long term. So the reason why these are not super popular is because you can't just take your combine or your tiller and run it through a field and you're done, right? So you have to probably do things a little bit more manually, which makes it not as attractive. So methods to traditional sustainable farming would be agroforestry, so vegetation planted as windbreaks to prevent wind and soil erosion. Okay, I'll show you a picture of that in just a second. Strip cropping, so a form of intercropping that uses different spaces, rooting characteristics to prevent soil erosion. So we talked about niche partitioning, and so this was having a plant that its roots are pretty surface level, but they go horizontal next to a plant that's roots go pretty deep, but are more vertical. And then contour plowing and harvesting parallel to the topographical contours of the land. So if you're going around the shapes of the land, you're going to have less erosion because wind is probably going to pass right over it as opposed to into it. Okay. And then terraces. Okay, we've seen that farm shaped sloping into flat step-like terraces. Again, here's pictures like that. So these are really cool intercropping methods. So this is your strip farming. Okay. Or this is contour plowing, excuse me. So it uses different shapes, and so that way the wind, if it's just blowing this way, it's still not getting like the surface area of these guys here. Okay. Just want to make sure I get this right. Agroforestry. So they're using the trees here to make sure that the coffee beans don't get burnt in the hot sun. And they also are attracting, again, trees to get those birds and things like that to eat all the bugs. And then finally, the intercropping, which is pretty cool. So the corn is actually planted in between rows of beans. And so it's acting as a windbreak. So when the corn gets hit by the wind, it's reducing the corn that's hitting the beans. And then their roots grow at different depths, so they're doing a lot of soil conservation, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, so it's multiple birds, minimal amount of stones, you know?
So
save rocks, kill the birds.
the better option?
I think it probably just depends on what you're trying to grow, to be honest.
Which one's the most cost effective?
That's a good question. So I would say probably most cost effective. Probably this one, because you can probably still do it with mechanical means, because you're just doing it in a certain shape, which is reducing wind erosion, but you still could use like a plow. But you're probably going to have a little bit better soil quality in one of these two because you aren't using any mechanical things. And then if these trees are fruit bearing too, then you're getting two for the price of one. So that's a good question. Okay, so some modern sustainable farming techniques include using perennial plants, so plants that live for multiple years and do not need to be replanted each season. So if you don't have to plow each season or till each season, that's going to help your soil stay in one spot. And also in between seasons, your roots aren't being taken out of, right? So again, perennials, you're not using as much resources to replant them because they're coming back year after year. The roots are keeping the soil in place, etc. Okay, so then finally, no-till agriculture. Some of you have pointed out about our video today. Okay, it's an annual cropland that is not tilled or plowed in between seasons. So if soil stays intact because the roots are there, and it's better for farmers because then that soil and everything is still staying in place. They don't have to waste as much money and resources on tilling. Okay, they just take their sowers and lay the seeds along their troughs. Pretty cool. Okay, the use of green manure, so plant growth with an intentional plowing it under at the end of the season. So this isn't necessarily to prevent soil erosion, but it is adding things. Let's see if I got a picture of that. No, I didn't get one. So it's adding things like legumes, and so legumes are things like beans, and so their main job of the legume is they can take nitrogen from the atmosphere and put it back into the soil, so plants can use it. And so if you're doing that, you're adding fertilizer essentially to the soil by just growing the legumes there, and then whenever they get tilled into the soil, it's going to put all that nitrogen back in there. So not only like a no-till or leaving the soil alone, but you're naturally adding more nitrogen, and then you're still profiting from the beans. Okay, peanuts I think are legumes. Legumes is like a genus of plant. Yeah, same thing as genre. Yeah. Okay. Use of limestone, so calcium carbonate, sedimentary rocks that have been ground up or crushed can be used as fertilizer. So this balances acidic soil. If you took biology last year, you know that acid breaks away calcium carbonate, which we need a lot of that carbon and calcium for our plants. And so when it's too acidic, things aren't going to grow. So they'll crush up some limestone, which is sedimentary rock, and put it in there. Okay, and then rotational grazing. So this is one that we watched, if you were paying attention, in that Zac Efron show where they root farm animals from different plots of land to make sure they don't overeat it and to make sure they're spreading out the manure equally. And so I don't remember what the show is exactly called, but you can find it on Netflix. Pretty interesting. If you like anything about this class, you'll like that show. Okay, or Zac Efron. So you're rotating your poop, and then you're preventing overgrazing, things like that. You guys know what that looks like to live in Missouri. Okay, and then another method of practicing sustainable agriculture is using organic agriculture, so production of crops to sustain to improve the soil without synthetic pesticides or fertilizers. So organic agriculture uses natural/ecological systems. It increases the soil mass, organic matter, and biological activity. Retains as much of organic matter and nutrients in the soil as possible. Avoids the use of synthetic fertilizer and pesticides. Reduces the adverse environmental effects of agriculture. Okay, so there's a big push for what is organic and what isn't as far as what you buy at the grocery store. So there are some limitations on what they can label as organic, and so that's the Delaney Clause in Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, designed to prevent potentially harmful cancer food ingredients. But like technically everything's organic because it all has carbon in it, and that's literally the only rule you have to have for that. But they do make sure that they're not putting like harmful chemicals like Agent Orange into your food and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of helpful. Questions, comments, concerns? All right, cool. That's your module 33. Your review will be posted here shortly. Go ahead and take out your